Are you anxious or depressed? Maybe your life just isn't as good as you think it should be. Well, you're in luck because today's episode, we're going to take a look at errors in thinking that could cause your life to suck. And guess what? Everybody does these because everybody sucks. This is the Existential Stoic Podcast. I'm Randy. That's Danny. What's going on, Danny?
So, right. That's the message that everybody should take home from this.
Everybody sucks. Not just some people, but everybody.
Everybody. It's
Yeah.
universal. I
Well,
mean, that is
everybody
true,
sucks at
though.
something.
Yeah, it is true. Everybody sucks
Hmm.
at some times and at some things.
Yeah. Well, this is an interesting episode. I got this idea because I've read recently these two books that I would say are pretty much revolutionary, at least in my life. One's called Feeling Good, and then the more recent book is called Feeling Great. And it's based off of this version of cognitive behavioral therapy called Team CBT, where basically they take people who have been like anxious or depressed for like years. And in 1 2 hour session, resolve everything, and then they check in years and months later, and it's still resolved. Like
That's awesome.
mind blowing how this stuff works. But it turns out that a lot of the problems are due to these cognitive distortions or errors in people's thinking that cause them to be anxious or depressed.
Well, it's funny when you brought up this episode, I was thinking too, because, like reading like all the existentialists and stuff and like ethics and stuff, like all of those philosophers, especially existentialists, recognize that like so much of like our problems is because of how we're interpreting the world, like the meanings we're choosing to accept and apply to things. And that all you have to do, it's like the context doesn't have to change. You just have to change how you're thinking about it. And it's really amazing how powerful really our like interpretive abilities are, to just switch like our thinking and then all of a sudden everything's different. It's really weird how it works, but it is possible to do. It's like amazing.
Absolutely. Like even in this book, they mentioned, 2,500 years ago, Epictetus saying it's not what happens to you in life, it's what you think about it.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah.
And that's true. Like it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's get into it because there are 10, so this could take us a little while to go through. I
Oh,
figured I'd just read off what each one is and then we could kind of discuss it. We could
all right.
riff back and forth like we're jazzy jazz musicians. Okay, so cognitive distortion number one, all or nothing thinking. You see things in black or white categories. If your performance falls short of perfect, you see yourself as a total failure.
A good one.
Interesting. Dude, I mean, this happens to me all the time. Like I think that I should be this amazing computer programmer slash hacker, and if I'm
Uh,
not, then I'm a total failure because
uh,
I've only been doing it for a few years and I'm not like brilliant yet.
Dude, I struggled with this, like, especially like perfectionism, like, for so long. And like, it's the same thing, right? Like, it's either like you have to have like, it's perfect or you suck. But the reality is you can't be perfect. Nobody's perfect. Like, nothing is ever done perfectly. And I think, it's funny to even try to measure ourselves that way because it makes no sense because we never apply that same measurement to other people either.
Hmm.
It's like, usually if we're talking to a friend and they say like, "Oh, I failed at this thing," you're like, "Well, you did all this other stuff. That's awesome." Like, but then it's yourself and you're like, "You loser, suck."
Yeah. Yeah. I like this. I was actually talking with my dad about it because I was watching the Olympics and they have this speed climbing event. And I was telling him, I was like, dude, these guys climb a wall in like 4 seconds,
They like throw
4.7
themselves up it.
seconds.
I
Yeah,
know.
it's like crazy. And he's like, yeah, that's incredible. Like, imagine all the stuff they can do. And I was like, well, probably they can't do anything. Like, they probably don't know how to use a microwave. They probably don't know how to do their laundry. But like climbing a wall, they can do really well.
I was just talking to her about Dan about that when we were watching the Olympics. I was like, it is funny when you think about it. These people get so good at these very particular skill sets. Like, like the what is it, the pommel horse thing for like
Oh, yeah.
gymnastics and all. Like it's just funny because it's like, yeah, they're incredible at it. They make it look like in the rock climbing, they make it look easy. Like as if like you could like almost like a video game. But at the same
Hmm.
time, it's like I mean, they're spending so much time doing it, obviously, to get that good. So it's like, what else are they like lacking in? It's kind of
Probably
funny.
everything.
Yeah.
Probably everything. So the next cognitive distortion is overgeneralization. You see a single negative event as a never-ending pattern of defeat. This is one that I can relate to because it's
Yeah.
like, you finally ask that girl out, she says no, and you're like, I knew I was a freaking loser. I'll never find anybody, and blah blah blah. Or like, you fail that exam, and it's just like, oh, I knew I didn't have it. I'm never gonna get it. And it's just like easy to overgeneralize these single events to be a whole entire life problem.
And this one too, I think, is really important because like this is something we have a tendency to do broadly, not just with respect to ourselves. Like easy examples like with politics, like, oh, the Democrats are completely wrong, or the Republicans are completely, you know what I mean? Like as if
Mm-hmm.
there's like, everything they say is absolutely wrong. And on the other side's right. Like these overgeneralizations can really be an impediment too, I think, to our own thinking and you know, being open-minded and being flexible with the world and like being able to adjust ourselves to different things, and recognize that like, we're wrong sometimes, or maybe the world, other people are wrong sometimes, and just recognize that there's more gray area than we think.
Yeah, and they're just people. Yeah,
Yeah,
freaking crazy.
yeah,
Overgeneralization. The next one is mental filter. You pick out a single negative detail and dwell on it exclusively so that your vision of all reality becomes darkened, like the drop of ink that colors the entire beaker of water.
it's a good one, dude. And I think everybody who's ever been like depressed, anxious knows this one because you get in that negativity loop. Like we've talked about this before, but it's
Hmm.
amazing how it happens. Like you start getting negative about some things, and it's like you can't fool yourself. Everything becomes self-fulfilling because and I think that's the other interesting thing about like our mental like world is because it's interpreted in the meanings we apply, it's self-fulfilling. If we see negativity, it's going to all be negative because it's going to all be interpreted that way. It's really interesting.
And it's like one of those things where you can kind of, I know for myself, like I can pick out the bad things that have happened. I can like line them up. I can be like, this happened and that happened and that happened. But I'm totally not looking at all the other stuff. Like the sun still came up. I still had 3 meals. I still had a place to sleep at night. But it's like this thing happened and that thing
Yeah.
happened and
But
that.
that's what's
Yeah.
so funny is like, we like focus, it's so easy to focus on and justify these belief systems, by just looking at like you're basically cherry picking events, and then you're also interpreting them a very particular way to make it fit this model of reality, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, amazing.
All right. So next one is almost like this, disqualifying the positive. You reject positive experiences by insisting they don't count for some reason or other. In this way, you can maintain a negative belief that is contradicted by your everyday experiences. How
Yeah.
about that?
That's a good
Yeah.
one though, dude, because I remember definitely doing that when I was like depressed because like it's almost like you're in a mood where like you don't want anything to be positive. So you just discount it or just, don't see it almost.
Yeah. I do this stuff all the time where it's like something I'm in a bad mood and something good will happen. I'll be like, well, that doesn't count because like that's like one time in a million. Like
Yeah.
what?
Or it's probably gonna turn out bad anyway.
Yeah,
Like
exactly. Because everything else is falling to shit. That's just what, yeah, it doesn't
you
count.
know what's funny? I think we forget sometimes we're just animals and like,
Hmm.
you know, we're
Yeah,
not like, that's it. Like we're not these perfect rational agents or anything. We're just, people wandering around the world.
trying to scrape by. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
The next one is jumping to conclusions. You make a negative interpretation, even though there are no definite facts that convincingly support your conclusion. There's two types of this. One would be mind reading, where you arbitrarily conclude that someone is reacting negatively to you and you don't bother to check this out. And the second is the fortune teller error, where you anticipate that things will turn out badly and you feel convinced that your prediction is an already established fact.
That's interesting. And this is related, right? Because it's like that, it's self-fulfilling prophecy, right? You're
Hmm.
already thinking this way, so things are going to be interpreted that way. The other one, too, about the people is interesting because that one's, I've learned over the years to like never, my interactions with people, we don't know what's going on under people's heads. And like, I know it's happened with me a lot because of the way I guess I am sometimes. Like, I tend not to express, like, I guess, emotions a lot. So, like, sometimes people think like I'm, uh, aloof or standoffish and stuff in some cases, but I'm not. It's just like, it's just me. And like I realize like, we don't know people in a world, so you can't make those quick judgments about them because you never know. Like chances are they
Yeah.
probably didn't even notice or don't care. Or like
Hmm.
most people are very generous about giving other people to, I think, room if, there's issues going on or whatever.
Hmm. Yeah, like I'm always blown away. Like sometimes there'll be people who I run into often, but never really interact with. And
Yeah.
then I build up this story about how they don't want to meet me, and they probably build up the same story about me. And then like one time or another, I'll just be like, "Hey, I'm Randall," and it'll be like nonstop conversation for hours. And I was like, "How wrong is my thinking? Like, how terribly wrong is my thinking?"
It's the
Yeah.
truth though, because I think a lot of people think that way. It's easy to because we don't know, and it's easy to kind of misinterpret people's like emotions and and you don't know what's going on in their life either. So like something
Hmm.
that could we might interpret as like negative against us really has nothing to do with us at all.
Yeah. And then the other thing is uh the fortune teller error. So you think things will turn out badly and you think that's a fact. And this is crazy because like sometimes there'll be things that I want to do that I'm afraid to do because I don't want to be disappointed. Like I really want to do this, but I'm probably not going to enjoy it and then it'll be really disappointing because I
You built
this
it
is this
up.
thing that I wanted to do, and then it
Yeah.
sucked. So now what do I have to look forward to? And then like sometimes I'll go and do this stuff, and it's like way better than I expected. And I'm like, I was so wrong about that too.
Yeah, it's hard. I think that's like too trying to like withhold judgment, especially from like new experiences until you just do it. Because like
Yeah.
and it's easy to though, I think that's the problem of like that can happen, I think, too, from that expectation building things up, then having that expectation fail a couple times, and then you start to think that way, and then you don't
Mm,
do anything. It can be really
yeah.
like justifications, I think, too, for just, I think a lot of this, too, is also trying to justify and explain our own lives to ourselves when we're in a bad place and are struggling to move out of that? And
Hmm.
so you're kind of like making the rest of the world seem that way always.
Yeah. One thing that I heard that them recommending about these type of things when you think it'll turn out negatively is to record your thoughts about what you think will happen and then go and do it and then record what actually happened afterwards and just do that for a number of events and you start to see how far off your thinking is.
Yeah, that's a good one, actually. That's a really good way to do that. I like that.
Yeah.
Because then you have like
So,
concrete evidence too. You're not like relying on memory. Sorry.
right. Yeah, no, you could
Yeah.
fill up a whole journal of all the times you're wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. The next one is magnification, catastrophizing, or minimization. So you exaggerate the importance of things, such as your goof up or someone else's achievement, or you inappropriately shrink things until they appear tiny, your own desirable qualities, or the other fellow's imperfections. This is also called the binocular trick. So yeah, so this is an interesting one because
Yeah.
everybody has something about themselves that they don't like. And so like you blow that completely out of proportion and something that other people probably don't even notice. Or there's the other things is like you mess up and you think it's the end of the world and everybody's gonna,
Yeah.
you think that because you're embarrassed, everybody else is gonna be talking about it forever and it's never gonna go away and all that stuff.
Well, I remember this. This actually I remember very clearly from grad school. We'd have to present a lot or like go to conferences and stuff. And it was it's a lot of stress because like especially like if you're doing it for the first time. And I mean there's so many people, myself included, and I knew a lot of people that I went to school with who had the same experience. Like they'd be nervous you know, the talk would they thought would go terrible, like from the standpoint of like in their mind. But in reality, it went fine. Like, yeah, they might have been a little nervous, maybe a little shaky, but nobody cares. But like in
Hmm.
their mind, it goes terrible. And then like dealing with that after the fact and like then questioning, like, should I be doing this? And like, all this stuff starts to come up because like you think you failed so bad and like everybody noticed and everybody's gonna remember this forever. And it's like, dude, one, most people know you're new at this, and this is like you're probably your first time or whatever, and most people are nervous presenting in front of a group. Like you
Hmm.
know, it's funny when you think about it because like if it, I always try to, I more often than not now, I try to think of like if I was like if I was not myself and an outsider, how would I look
Hmm.
at this? And
Hmm.
99% of the time, it's like you would probably just be like, oh, whatever, like or not even remember it or notice it at all.
Hmm.
So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. The next one, oh, this is a big one. The next one is a big one. Emotional reasoning. You
Cool.
assume that your negative emotions necessarily reflect the way things are. I feel it, therefore it must be true. How often do we talk about this? How when we're in a
Yeah.
miserable mood, we think that the rest of our life is going to suck.
Yeah.
And when we're in a good mood, we think the rest of our life is going to be great.
It's funny too. The more I think, I always do think that like, this emphasis on reason and being like a rational person that you saw like throughout the history of Western civilization, I think was kind of messed up because emotions are so strong. I mean, they are like they
Hmm.
can totally like I mean we've talked about it so many times, but they totally like have this power to just transform your entire thinking and change everything very quickly. And like especially like, I notice that every time I get tired, dude, I get miserable almost. Like it's like
Hmm.
ridiculous. As if I should
Yeah.
have like be wide awake until I'm ready to go to bed and then just go to bed?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's
It's
like
a
I mean they talk about like the hungry, angry, lonely, tired, and it's like whenever those things happen, I'm just in a bad freaking mood, and
yeah.
like and there are times when I catch myself like I'll be like, oh yeah, I'm tired, or oh I haven't eaten, but like most of the time I totally forget that stuff, and then I'm
Yeah.
just in a bad mood, and I think my life is terrible, and it's
Oh,
just like yeah,
the hungry one kills me because like there's been so many times I'm like, so, and then I have a snack and I'm like, oh, that's right, I haven't eaten in like 10 hours.
dude, that happened to me today. Like I was miserable, like getting like really angry, and then I was like, oh yeah, I haven't eaten in forever. Like
And then you
I
feel like
I
a
ate,
total jackass.
I went and I ate, and afterwards I felt like I was walking on
Yeah.
rainbows. Like it's
Yeah.
just crazy.
It's like I was just starving.
Yeah.
That's why I was angry.
Yeah, there could be better indicators, just like a flashing like you need to eat. You
Yeah.
need to eat.
But emotions are funny though because it's really weird. They are powerful and like trying to get
Hmm.
more. That's been one of the hard things too, is just trying to get more aware of them and like understand them is difficult.
Mm, definitely. Well, it's a lifelong process, you know. But
Everything
here's the
is.
thing. So like thoughts and emotions are intimately connected. And
Oh yeah.
so one of the things they talk about in these books on CBT is like every emotion and feeling that we have is actually predated by a thought. Now, the thought may occur so quickly that we don't notice it, and that's what oftentimes happens. But by recognizing your thoughts and finding the distortions in them, you can alter your emotions until essentially, if you're in a bad mood, it's just because you're holding on to a distorted thought. And once you
Yeah.
let go of that or figure out a truer version of that, then yeah.
Yeah. It is interesting. And I think it's funny because like this is the kind of stuff too that like it's amazing how quickly like when you start to recognize this stuff, you can change your thinking and like start to take control more like active control in how you're perceiving the world. But it does also it takes time too to like get to the point I think where like you don't have to keep reminding yourself and like, going back to these tools, but it is amazing how fast you can just change your thinking through this.
And dude, this is like crazy because the team CBT model is completely like scientifically based. So they measure scores for like anxiety and depression before the appointments and afterwards, and like make sure that they are making an improvement. But it's like scientifically documented more effective than antidepressant medications, which
Because
isn't a big thing to say because antidepressants don't work. But like this
yeah.
is like something that's like, holy cow, how come this isn't the first line of defense for anxiety and depression as opposed to just putting people on medications?
Well, that's always killing me, dude, because studying philosophy for so long, like so many philosophers focus on this because they're focused on like the inner world, And like that's always blew my mind. It's like, well, it's like our thinking is always the number one reason, like the meanings we're applying to the world, like how we're doing with that, like, choosing for ourselves, like, all of that is usually the cause of these things. And working on that is going to fix it. But I think, we talked
Hmm.
about this before. I think we're too much in the habit, especially in like the US, of like treating symptoms because that's what hurts at the moment instead
Hmm.
of the actual cause of it, then like actually trying to work on ourselves to make it so that we can function better in the world and be happier without this crap that then like, gets in the way of it.
That is a good point because we can make symptoms go away like that,
Yeah.
but it'll just shift to somewhere else. They call it the symptom imperative, where like you have one symptom, you treat the symptom, it'll go away, but something else will crop up.
Well, and the problem is too, I think with that too, is like it's so easy to take a pill, right? Or to like,
Hmm.
whatever, like whatever the medication is, right? It's so easy to do. And the problem with that too is like if you see the results from that immediately, it's like then you get in this thinking like, oh, it's not me, it's chemicals or it's this or that, or like, and it's like, well, not necessarily, it
Yeah,
also could be you that could be causing those chemicals too, because our
the
thoughts and how
placebo
we
effect.
well, yeah, and
Yeah.
how we feel also like affects our hormones and everything else, which changes so much. Like it's amazing. We can
Hmm.
make ourselves feel totally ill, if we just think about
Hmm.
it long enough. So it's like, yeah, it's
Oh,
amazing.
definitely. So the next one is should statements. You try to motivate yourself with shoulds and shouldn'ts as if you had to be whipped and punished before you could be expected to do anything. Musts and oughts are also offenders. The emotional consequence is guilt. When you direct should statements towards others, you feel anger, frustration, and resentment.
Oh, I see. Like obligation type thing. Like that you
Yeah,
should
so
have
you
done
say
this.
should, like I should have done this, I should have known better, I shouldn't have done that, or towards other people. They should do this, they shouldn't do that, they should think this way, they should do that thing. And it's
Yeah.
interesting because they call it like shooting on yourself and masturbating.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah.
That's really good.
But yeah. But it's
But it
like
may
I
oh good.
mhm.
I was gonna say, well,
Okay.
it's like that black and white thinking, right? Where it's like there
Hmm.
can't be any gray area or there can't be any like degrees. I think that's always funny too, because we always like we look at it like we look at the world in terms of these opposites of like failure, success, like good, bad. But it's like all of that is a degree. There's a line connecting those two things, and they're just the extreme endpoints, right? So it's like you
Hmm.
can fall in so many places in there, and you're like, that aren't bad.
Yeah. Yeah, they talk about how there's three actual shoulds, and then anything outside of that is just kind of a gray area. So there's the laws of nature, like if you jump off a building, you're gonna fall. You
Or
should
like if you don't
fall.
eat, right? Like,
Yeah,
stuff like that. Yeah.
yeah. There's the laws of man. So just like, if the speed limit says 50 miles an hour, you should go 50 miles an hour or under, or else you're gonna, do that.
There's
And then the laws
consequences.
of, yeah, or the laws of morality, kind of like the Ten Commandment types of stuff, like don't kill, don't steal, don't lie, that type of stuff. Yeah, those are the shoulds, and then everything else is just kind of going to cause you a headache.
Yeah. Well, I think it's because we forget, like, everything's a matter of degree, and we're so unwilling to give ourselves. I think the other problem with this thinking too, and I know because personally I fell in that trap for a long time, but like you fall in this trap of way of thinking where like you don't even allow yourself to fail anything. So it's like you can
Hmm.
never move forward either. You can never you never have opportunities to overcome obstacles and move forward and like progress in things because you're so afraid of like and so harsh on yourself for any sign of like failure or anything that you don't even look at
Yeah,
them as like just like, obstacles basically what they
yeah,
are.
because you need failure is part of the process.
Yeah, for everything.
I thought it was interesting how they list the consequences of these shoulds or musts when they're directed towards yourself or towards others. So like when it's directed towards yourself, the consequence is guilt. And then when it's directed towards others, the consequence is anger, frustration, and resentment. And then so it's interesting because it's like perhaps maybe you're feeling in life guilty or you're feeling angry, resentful, frustrated. It's like, well, there's probably a hidden should, and that may not be true.
Yeah. And it's probably actually accurate. I think that's an interesting way to look at it too, because we have to get like we can't, you can't do things, you're not going to attack those people and do stuff to them. So it's like instead you get these strong emotional responses that then make you feel not well, and it's like,
Mhm.
yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. Cool.
Um,
So the next one is labeling and mislabeling. This is an extreme form of overgeneralization. Instead of describing your error, you attach a negative label to yourself. I'm a loser. When someone else's behavior rubs you the wrong way, you attach a negative label to them.
You're
He's
an
a
idiot.
goddamn louse.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mislabeling involves describing an event with language that's highly colored and emotionally loaded.
That's
Yeah.
a good one too, because I think that I do people do that all the time, like constantly.
Hmm.
And it's
Hmm.
it's a really good one because I think if you're aware of it, you start to see how much it happens. And like it is such a wild generalization, right? To say like even to say like I'm a failure, it's like, but really like think about it. Like you've definitely done stuff in your life. You've definitely done lots of things. So failure in what sense? Like, and we use it
Hmm.
so blanket to just mean like at everything. It's like that can't be true. So
hmm.
it must be wrong.
Yeah, yeah, because this is a huge one, and I mean, this is a big cause for like a lot of anxiety and depression. Because something will happen, there will be some event, and then you'll label yourself like, "Oh, I'm worthless," or "My life sucks," I'm a loser," all this different stuff, and it'll make you go down a completely different path, and you just like don't question that actual thought. It's just like
Yeah.
one of the techniques they talk about is be specific. Like, yeah, that's a label, but specifically, how are you a loser?
Yeah.
Oh, you failed an exam? Well, good on you. Like, look at how many times Abraham Lincoln failed and people still look up to him. So it's like all this different stuff.
Well, I think that's the funny thing too. We act as if like our lives or other people would evaluate our lives based on individual events, you know, rather than like you just mentioned like Abraham Lincoln and stuff. When we look back at like people who lived these lives that we consider great, we judge their life over the whole life. Like it's a holistic judgment rather than like about individual things that happened. And instead, when we think about ourselves, it's those individual things that happen that get raised up real high rather than like the holistic person, right?
Yeah. Or like, I mean, or it's like I'm gonna get this whole thing kind of wrong, but they were taught in one of the books they were talking about Hitler, how like, you know, he's he's done terrible things, like terrible atrocities, and he has. But also, I mean, he was a statesman. He motivated lots of people. He changed the course of an entire nation. So, like, in terms of success in that area, he was a success. But like all the stuff he did over here made him a terrible
Well,
person. So
that's
it
the
kind of
crazy
depends
part,
what you're
right?
looking at.
If his like the crazy part is like if his views weren't so toxic and terrible and like hateful, like he probably could have done. I mean, that's the weird part, right? Is like when you think back on these things, like, you know, people that do horrible, they could have probably done great things if they had just not had those other horrible aspects, I guess, right? But yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, it's true. Like it's hard to judge people, and it's hard to like looking at we tend to look at one aspect of people and make it out to be the whole person. I think that's always problematic, right?
Hmm. Absolutely. So the last one is personalization. You see yourself as the cause of some negative external event, which in fact you are not primarily responsible for.
Huh.
How often does this happen where someone will think that, something happens and then they'll blame themselves for it? Like,
Oh, dude,
yeah.
good example. I think this one happens to a lot of people is like, and it's, I mean, it's crap. It sucks, but like someone like they love passes away. And like then you start doing like, well, what if I had left my house 2 minutes earlier that day? Or like, what if I had made her, what if I done this day? And it's like, well, you can do that till the end of time. You can do that like, well, what if? And it's like the situation's still not going to change.
Hmm.
And I think like yeah, that's an interesting one. Where like as if it was your fault because you made this choice that thing then happened. That's
Yeah.
really unrelated to that choice.
Yeah. Or like one of the things that they talk about in the book is one of the worst things is like someone you know closely commits suicide, especially had you have had an interaction with them recently. Like that can be really terrible. You think like, how could I not see that? And it's just like, well, hang on. Like, can you predict the future?
Yeah.
Like, isn't God, if he, she, or it exists, the only one that can really see into the future? Well, then what do you think? You're a god or something like that?
Yeah.
And yeah,
I remember I
it's a
had that
challenging
experience
one.
actually. I had a friend in grad school who committed suicide over the summer after we were done. And I remember
Hmm.
because me and the other guys that knew him really well were like talking on the phone about it, and they were all like, "Well, like I can't believe we didn't know, and we did." And it's like, how could we have though? I mean, like like we knew like we obviously knew some problems, but like we didn't think they were that bad. He never like talked, and it's people can hide things very easily too. So it's like,
Dude, and especially something that
yeah,
we make so shameful, like
I know,
anxiety and depression, we make them so shameful. Like, oh, there must be something wrong with you if you're anxious or depressed. And then it's like, of course, they're not going to open themselves up to people when
yeah.
it's like so bad that they think it's that it's getting really like I
Well,
remember when we would meet up every week, there was like one time when I was feeling like really, really terrible about myself, and I told you about it, and you're like, well, yeah, everybody feels that way sometimes. And like literally that lifted this whole like veil of clouds that had been over me for like a week or something. It was just like having somebody that I could
yeah.
trust to talk to about it and just recognizing that it happens to everybody.
Well, it does, dude, to everyone. And, like you can't like change that reality of that we're people. Like these things happen. Like the best we can do is maybe like work on ourselves and try to like be aware of these things so that they don't happen, obviously, and we don't get caught in this trap of thinking this way. But yeah, dude, it happens to everybody. And it's funny too, because I think we also tend to overemphasize or underemphasize our own level of control in the world, like and our own
Hmm.
level of like agency, like especially with like things like, with respect to other people and stuff, or like even like, our own emotions and stuff. It's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, so there you have it. There's 10 cognitive distortions, proof that we're all thinking wrong. And yeah, if
That
if you
everybody's
did
wrong.
enjoy that, yeah, if you did enjoy that, I would highly encourage you to check out the books Feeling Good or Feeling Great. Or there's also a podcast that he has called the Feeling Good Podcast. Really good. I listened to an episode today, actually. Very interesting. And yeah, definitely worthwhile. Anything else you want to add, Danny?
And I think that we can throw that stuff in the show notes, so
Okay, sweet. Sounds good. Well, thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy, come back, join us for another episode. And of course, leave some awesome positive reviews. We'll catch you next time. Until then, this is the Existential Stoic Podcast. I'm Randy. That's Danny. I'll see you later, Danny.
later, Randy.